It's Friday. That means it's time to deploy Friday. And I'm Robert Douglas with Platform SH and several guests. We're going to talk about open source contribution today, as well as social networking and how the two can go together to develop amazing careers for those who do them. I've got some wonderful guests today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Hello, Yara.
Hello, thank you very much for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss such important topics.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you, and what are some of the big things you do?
I'm from Brazil, so I am in São Paulo State, in São Carlos City, and I do work with community on organizing conferences and trying to enhance people's career, make people grow, and with people growing, we can have a better ecosystem and communities, and with that, we also can make better results for all the economy and for companies and all that. So I love to work with tech. I have contributed yet with open source, but I'm really passionate about working with people and people who like to make, who likes to build and collaborate. So that's my background. Today I work for the Developers Conference.
Awesome, thank you. Bruno, introduce yourself, please.
Hey everyone, hey Robert, thanks a lot for being here. Hi Yara, Otavio, great to be here with all of you. And today we're going to discuss about your career, right? That's the most important part of here. And the things that I've been doing for a long time is to help developers like you improve your career through many ways. But open source, I think, is the best way for you as a developer to share your knowledge, to get the best jobs, to participate to actually grow technically as a developer. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today.
Great. And Bruno, since I know that we've just put it into the description of the video, we put a link to your book. Do you want to tell us what that book is?
Yes, I was going to talk a little later, but that's okay. So I'm going to right now in this webinar, I'm going to give all of you here a gift, right? I'm going to give you a gift of my book. It's called The Best Developer Job Ever. That is going to help you get the best jobs. And one of the main ways to do this is actually contributing to open source. So I talk about this in the book too. So there's a link on the description below where you can click on it and you can get the book for free. How about that?
Fantastic. Can't be better. And my colleague Otavio, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. Sorry to my deprecated t-shirt. It celebrates 20 years Java. This year is 25 years Java. I'm so glad to be here with a lot of friends to talk about career in open source. Basically, open source changed my whole life, and there's an amazing history to tell.
Awesome. Great. Thanks. So the way we're going to do this show is we're going to spend a little time at the beginning, and each one of us is going to tell our own story. Starting with Bruno, talking about how open source contribution became a part of your life and how you bring your own skills with social networking into that, and what are the results?
All right, so let me tell you guys, what open source means for all of us, right? For software developers, if you go to there's a lot of social networks out there, right? So if you go to YouTube, for example, YouTube is the social networks of who, right? Of video editors, right? Those are the people that edit videos and post videos, right? If you go, to Twitter, right? It's a network of people writing, right? Or writers, of bloggers, right? Microblogging, right? But if you're a developer, where should you go meet people, right? On the social networks where developers meet, right? That's the whole point. So open source is exactly this place, right? It's a place where developers like you meet, not to just share knowledge and teach things, but actually to write code together. So open source allows you to do that, and it's a great place to meet people. It's a great place to hone your own skills, right? To actually how do you say that? To green the axe, right? So you can get better, right? But it's also the best place that you can do, that you can work on the most amazing project in the planet. So a lot of people tell me, oh, I want to get started with software development, or I want to get better at software development, but my company is using old technology, or my project is not very advanced, or I'm doing something in my project that's not very interesting. So there's thousands, millions of open source projects out there that you can choose to work on the most amazing things. You can work on the top operation system in the planet. You can work on the top clouds solution in the planet, the top frameworks in the planet. I mean, you can work anything on the top virtual machines, right? I mean, all of those things, you can work on it, right? You can participate on this, and by participating on open source, that kind of changed my life. I have not been participating too much. I'm not like Otavio that participated a lot in terms of writing code, right? But I've been helping structure and create open source communities for I don't know how many years, right? Open source was a big thing for me because I started working with Java in 1995, and I started evangelizing Java in 1996, and the whole discussion around open source, right? Around 2000, there's a big discussion in the planet about, oh, Java is not open source and this kind of thing. So I was heavily involved on this, right? So I got very, very deep in that discussion. I helped it. We discussed exactly what it means to Java to be open source at that time. And we all have to understand that Java is from 1995, right? And the open source definition was only created in 1998, right? So it's like, of course, Java was not open source because there's no open source when Java first came out. But around 2000, we all started this whole discussion around open source worldwide, and we got together with all the big players at the time, Sun, IBM, and Apache, and everyone to get together to actually have the discussion about what would mean to be to Java to be open source. And then eventually Java was released as an open source, or free software open source license, GPL, a few years later. So that was a big discussion at the time. So for me, open source was part of everything that I did. And one of the interesting things that I eventually became the community manager for NetBeans, like Sun's top open source project at the time, or that was before Java was actually released as open source. So I mean, there's a lot of participation in open source in my career. But for the last few years, I have been working with developers like you to help you grow your career. There's no better way to kind of push your developer career than participate in an open source project or get involved in somehow. And that's what we're going to talk about here today.
Wow, thank you. Inspirational. And I love the analogy you make about the social network for developers being open source projects. I never thought of it that way, but even before Twitter, before Facebook, before YouTube, I now recognize that I felt that. I had that feeling when I would go to the Drupal.org issue queues. It was like a social network. It was a very argumentative social network, but it was a social network.
Yeah.
Not enough cats.
Yeah, it's good. It's good because one of the problems that we have a lot in the social networks is that everyone is doing their own thing, right? And although you have friends that kind of working together on something, you have like user groups or groups inside Facebook, they're kind of trying to do their own thing. But social network, usually you're doing everything, your own stuff, right? But when an open source project, you're always working with someone, right? And so it actually makes the whole social thing, I think, very, very interesting, because not only you're sharing what you know with other people, but you're actually working together to get something done, right? And I think that adds a very special part.
Cool. So Yara, how did you get into open source software? What was your beginning? Are you on mute?
Okay, so I was moving from another city, from São Carlos to São Paulo. It was basically like, a countryside to the biggest city in the country. And I have no friends, no family. And I was just beginning my second job in IT. And so I started to do some training and meet people inside my company. And then I learned about the user group, the Java user group. I met Bruno, I met Vinicius, who is my husband today. And they started talking to me, it's cool, and you come, you should meet, you should talk to people, you will learn, you will enhance your speaking abilities, and you have this great international conference called Java One, and it's amazing. You should learn more about that. And it became to be a dream on how I could go to that and how I could participate. So I first started collaborating with Soul Java, with the user group, and participating and collaborating. So, the first point for me was more on people and collaboration. And after going several times to Java One, I remembered that JCP and the JSRs, they were a very amazing thing that I saw on the Java community, on how people that were so different, they could collaborate and compete. And was my first contact with something that they call today frenemies, right? So you are friends, but you are competing, you are collaborating on something, but you are competing on another something. And that was something I said, this is amazing.
Oh, so I have questions about that before you go on. So
okay.
For people who aren't from the Java world, what are JSRs and JCPs?
Okay. So Otavio is the best person to explain that, but JCP is the Java Community Process, a place that really inspired all my business today, where several companies, big companies, Twitter, IBM, Oracle, and many, many others would work together to create the specifications for everything around the Java platform. And the JSRs are the Java specification request, where people that are specialists on that topic would create the specification and the reference implementation for one specific topic. Then companies would create their products and put in the market. But for the end user, for the Java user, those implementations would be compatible in somehow. So you guarantee that, you can have freedom to change the implementation you choose, but you still have the basic specification respected. So I saw all that companies that were big rivals on the market collaborating on creating a specification, and their vision of the future, their vision of the needs that such a big and great platform like Java has to develop, right?
So when you say frenemies, you're not talking about individuals, you're talking about companies that set aside their potential conflicting business interests to collaborate on something that can be mutual beneficial, not just for them, but for a very large number of people who are all using the technology.
Exactly. That was my first vision of that. But today we see several companies that are doing the same, right? Almost all the big companies, they are competing and collaborating with their main competitors, right? So you see happening with most companies today. They are competing in somehow with the other companies, but collaborating in another point with the same company, right? So, I could give several examples here, but, you see like AWS, they are competing with all other e-commerce companies, but they are working together on other services or other infrastructures and things like that. So that model that we saw in 2001, 2002, 2003, where companies would be competing and collaborating, and there was a model for that, that was something shocking for me. And this was done through open source, right? Because people, they were creating these specifications to be developed open or not. Some companies could have make the decision to develop their own solutions, not with open source, but the specification was open. So I was amazed on how everything related to open source could be reflected in other things that was not only code, right? It was about specification, it was about collaboration, it was about remote teams, it was about seeing the diversity of people and needs, and seeing the entire ecosystem, and not just that only part that you could work with. So that was my beginning, and my first motivation for open source. I had long nights and hours of discussion with Bruno when he was convincing every Brazilian that open source was important. And I was, but how people can make money with that, how people can survive with that, and it was hard to understand and to see where everything on the open source movement, they were trying to drive the community at that moment, and it was not as clear as it is today. But
how did you personally get involved, though? I mean, where did you find a way that you could make a difference? Where did your skills come in and blossom?
So I was really motivated to be part of one JSR. So I wanted to collaborate on this specification, on the code and everything. And that was a target for me and for my career. So I ended up by collaborating with the JSF specification. And that was my first,
that's Java server
target,
faces?
Java server faces. And so that was something that I really wanted to do. But then after that, I think everything, the mindset changed, right? So today, when we think about content, when we think about collaboration, when we think about working together, everything reflects a little bit of what open source came to teach us, right? And how we can really collaborate with people. And especially what I love on open source are, how people can create the process to allow everyone in different time zones, in different countries, in different languages, and people that you don't trust, and people need to earn trust to be part of an open source project. So everything, all this process that comes around, the end commit that a programmer do to collaborate to open source, I think this is fascinating for our careers, the process, the tools, the judgment, community do on each individual. And these have totally transformed the way I work today, and especially my main business, which is a conference today
which is TDC Online,
TDC, right? Yes, now it's online, but we did that for 12 years in Venice. And I can see how open source have changed everything, and the power we give to people. And I believe this can be reflected on teams today, even if your code is not open source, right? So you can always code and work as it was open source, even if your company doesn't allow you to do, even if your end project is not open source. So I think the soul of open source is one of the most important things we had on the last 20 years.
So a very inspiring movement. Yes.
Yes.
I totally agree. Let's move on. Thank you very much. That's a great story. And I really like that you made a resolution to get involved in something material to the project with the JSF specification, and that you achieved that goal, that you worked into it, you found a way to participate at that level. Even though I have to say that the people who participate in open source communities by organizing conferences, or making sure the website is well moderated, or proofreading the documentation, or doing anything else that is not necessarily directly coding, are often overlooked and underappreciated contributors. And I think that we should all strive for justice for all contributors. So yes, it's open source code, but the whole project depends on much more than just the code. And if it's not all there, then it's not all there. Good. Let's hear Otavio's story. So I first heard this story when he interviewed for Platform SH. So I'm looking forward to hearing the story again. It's good. Get the popcorn.
Okay. A lot of people question me, why did I pick open source? Why did I pick Java? But the real truth is Java picked me in the beginning. I mean, Java and open source on my whole life was chain of table, and that's why I have food on my table right now, because the technology plus open source in Java give me that opportunity to learn that. And at the beginning, I start with Linux kernel, and as you know, Brazilian usually do not speak English, and I had even terrible English, and Google Translate was even worse than today. Trust me. And I started to do a lot of questions. A lot of people from the Linux kernel kind of did not like that dumb question, and then I decided to move on to the Java community, and to me it was great and amazing because I started to do a lot of questions, and there was one committer, a huge committer, who decided to learn a little bit of Portuguese to help me on that. And that was great because usually people decide to learn language from some book, and I did a great stuff that I decided to learn Java from the JVM itself because I already had some background in C, C++. And because that, I decided to share what I know about OpenJDK because a lot of stuff were on that time in English. And because that, I meet So Java. And thanks for that, I meet, to me, my first professional reference. So for sure, Bruno Souza, Yara, Antonio Neto, Marin, Vinicius, the people who inspire me a lot and to be where I'm today. For sure, I have more people who inspire me. A lot of Brazilians, for sure, Elder Moraes, Edson Yanaga, also a lot of people, and James Gosling, and anyway. And then I decided to learn English because
James Gosling, you mean like the guy who created Java, right?
yes, he's like a friend of
Wow.
mine, ours right now. So anyway, I decided to learn English because Bruno invited me to do my first presentation in English. That was so inspired me because my first time outside Brazil. However, I have no idea about English, and I had like 3 months to learn a little bit of English. I'd like to say that my first presentation was amazing, but it's not true. That was terrible because I was scared of two stuff. The first thing, I was scared to the people do not understand me, and then was scared because the people understand me and do question. So
So what's worse, them not understanding you or them understanding you and challenging you?
yes, that was a huge trouble. And then I went there and could see, okay, that's no hard to learn English, and if you practice like every time. And then I decided to, do presentation around the world, write some English articles, help more and in Java words. And because I become more frequent and do several JVM commits, a lot of people invite me. Okay, why not you do some presentation here? I can support you to go to Europe, to US, and then I did a lot of trips around the world. I could improve my English, improve my career. A lot of people know me. That include big guy from Twitter, for sure. I mean, the Twitter's guy know my codes. Some guys from NASA because Java is huge language, and that was amazing. And then okay, English is not too hard. So and then I decided to move on and learn another language. So I decided to learn French, Spanish, Italian, and then start to growing up in my career. And then there was a life change because a lot of people invite me to the products that like to participate. So I can say my last 3 jobs, A lot of people invite me to work on that project, and that was amazing. I mean, instead of looking for, the people was looking for me, and that was amazing opportunity to learn a lot of stuff, meet people, share what I know, and do what I love right now. That's write code, whatever I can be.
And I have to brag a little bit about Otavio. Our marketing department loves this guy. He's the only person on the entire team who regularly produces articles in English, French, Italian, Portuguese, any others? Any
Spanish.
others? Spanish, right, exactly. It's like he's the guy to go to for any country. It's amazing. So congratulations on that. It really pays off to invest in learning how to communicate in another language, whether it's a programming language or a spoken language.
Yes.
The
So
best, the
shall we
best thing
start?
that I, the best thing about Otavio is that, you know, when he starts his talks and he's experimenting with all those different languages and he's talking on a language that you know he might not speak very well or something, then he says, "Don't worry, guys, I speak Java like we're everyone here." So then, so that's kind of the power of open source, right? You know, we have this common language that is the project that we're working on. So that's pretty cool.
Nice.
So everyone did something about Otavio, so I will do mine as well. May I?
Oh, yes,
So I
please.
think one thing is really important when I see Otavio's career and his path is something that how can we be useful for our community or our team or our organization or anything. And what I see that open source open this with a list, right? So you always know how you can help. There is a public list on everything that needs to be done, from the documentation to more advanced issues. And I see Otavio behavior as someone that was always available to collaborate, even with simple things, right? Doesn't need to be the most important and precious thing to do, but this behavior that people can have on their own careers that make yourself useful. If you are on a user group, if you are organizing a meetup, if you are organizing a meeting, anything you are doing, how people can see and say, whoa, it's good to have he on the team or she on the team, because they help, right? They see what needs to be done, they are committed and all that. And besides all the technical competencies that I see on Otavio, and we have been working together at TDC for several years, is this great behavior of being useful for your team. I don't know if useful is the perfect word for that, but you know, when you get to be important and you do what needs to be done, no matter if it's your preferred work or not. So I think when people see Otavio's career, it's hard to see how can I get there. And I think that helping and doing what needs to be done was one of the most important behaviors I see on Otavio on this last 10 years.
Totally agree. And that's all how he is at work too. So it's a character trait. So yeah, thanks, Otavio. I'm going to actually take a little bit of time and tell my own story in this respect, which is not usually what I do as the moderator of Deploy Friday, but I think it's relevant. I taught myself how to program basically on the train on the way to work to my job in an orchestra, because I was playing in an orchestra. And open source programming was literally the only thing that I could learn that was useful, that I could learn in Germany without speaking a lot of German, because I was learning German and I learned very slowly. I'm not like Otavio. And all of the other career options that I had ever considered, like being an elementary school teacher, were not open to me as an American who had just moved to Germany, who didn't speak great German, and I certainly didn't want to go and do another university degree at that point in my life. So the fact that the nature of open source software is that it's there online, and you could become the greatest expert on earth in any open source program ever written if you just have enough time to read all the code and understand it. It meant that it was the perfect subject for me to dive into as somebody who needed to teach themselves a skill to pull themselves out of the situation they were in. So I really needed to get beyond my musical training and the orchestra that I was in. And at music school, they don't teach you a lot of skills. They don't teach you like business management skills or technology skills. They teach you scales and chords and arpeggios, and those are useless if you're not a musician. So open source was my gateway to anything else other than music, and I took that. But the music didn't leave me. I really wanted to start a business with a CMS that was specific for musicians, because I thought that was really what the world needed more than anything. I wanted to make websites for musicians. I didn't realize at the time that they make the worst customers because they never have any money and they don't know what they want, and they won't give you clear instructions. So very, very bad target audience. But I was working on that, and that brought me to the Drupal project. I actually started out as a Java developer, but really got into open source strongly as a contributor through the Drupal project. And that's where, when I look back, I start to see the pattern that worked for me. And the pattern that worked for me was to find an itch that needed scratching, is the metaphor that people use, meaning that I would be developing something on a Drupal project that I was trying to bring forward, like a CMS for musicians. And it would not work the way I wanted it to in some way. And I would spend time developing a feature or fixing a bug and then putting that back into the Drupal project. And then the real magic happened, not the moment that the patch landed. That felt great from just a validation point of view, but the magic happened in the discussions around that. And given that I'm a very extroverted person, I would really talk to the people that were interacting with my code. I would use IRC at the time to, establish a relationship with those people. And this led directly to my first Drupal-related job, which was with a company called Lullabot, which was at the time the absolute coolest company you could work for. And then my second Drupal-related job, which was with Acquia, which was then also the coolest company you could work for because it was founded by the founder of Drupal himself. And then, the same pattern over and over. I would go into an area and do what I could to contribute to it, partially because I had a personal vested interest, but also because I saw that it would be really useful to the project. And along the way, I started being very interested in Drupal succeeding as a platform as well. So I would then, just go into the issue queue and take something and work on it just because it was there, just because it was a challenge, just to challenge myself. So that's my story, and it worked out really well for me. My timing was perfect. If I had tried to get into the internet world a little bit earlier, it wouldn't have existed, or a little later, it would have been much more difficult because more people were trying to do it. So I came with very low skills, but was able to build my skills because everything's online, and prove myself because the issue queues are wide open and public, and do networking along the way. I also went to conferences. So for example, I went to the very first significant Drupal meetup that ever happened in 2005 in Antwerp, Belgium, where I met Dries, the founder of Drupal. And within 5 minutes of meeting Dries, I said, Dries, somebody should write a book about Drupal. And a week after the conference, he referred a publisher to me who wanted to publish a book about Drupal. So I grew my skills and wrote a book about Drupal, which then turned out to be the first book about Drupal. Great timing. And that was very helpful for me and for the community. So that social networking, the personal internetworking component was so critical to me. And now that I've told my story, I have a really important question for all of you. Okay, well, a couple questions. Let's start. Bruno, you're an extrovert, right? You're on mute. You're a muted extrovert.
An extrovert? No, I'm not.
No, you're not.
No,
Okay.
not.
But you're very social and you feel comfortable talking to people?
I've learned to do this, yes.
Okay, so you're one of the introverts who makes an effort to overcome that. Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yara, extrovert? Okay.
Yes.
Otavio, I don't even think I need to ask. Not an extrovert?
No.
No? Okay.
If you travel with Otavio, you know he's not an extrovert.
Okay, so it's very interesting because I've seen a lot of extroverts like myself who really just thrive in like a conference situation where they're like all these people running around and like, oh, I get to talk to you. Oh, I get to talk to you. Oh, I want to talk to you. Let's talk. Let's meet. And then I've met one of my bosses, I remember, always seemed like an extrovert. So maybe he's like you, Bruno, who he was always like really sociable and very charismatic and could like really like talk to a lot of people and just was the star, okay? Almost like he was meant to be on stage. And then I saw, because we traveled together a little bit, he would like go away to his hotel room and crash and just like disappear and maybe all day disappear and just like really take care of himself. And is that more like you, Bruno?
I don't disappear much, but yes, but you know, I actually
you have to regain your energy.
Well, I think I don't think I need to regain my energy in this way, but I'm, for example, when I'm at a conference, I don't go and reach out to people, right? You know, that's one of the reasons why I'm a speaker. That's one reason why I go on stage, because then people come talk to me, right? So it's you know, if I just go in a conference where I'm not speaking, you know, I'm the guy in the corner, right? They're just walking around.
Okay.
Because no one comes talk to me, right? So
I asked this question for a very important reason. Okay, the three of you are really good talkers. Okay, you talk great. Okay, what about the people who are not great talkers? Are there a lot of contributors to these open source projects who maybe don't get the same benefit from this combination of networking plus contributing because maybe they're not getting their voice heard in the same way? Maybe they just don't feel like it. Maybe they've got a form of autism and they don't feel comfortable doing that. Maybe they're deaf or blind and have a barrier to communicating the same way that everybody else does or with the ease that everybody else does. What do you think?
They don't speak English.
Or it's a spoken language barrier. Are there people out there who are making the same or even more contribution as us, but not getting the same personal benefit from working on open source that we did because of some reason? What do you think?
Well, I think it depends. A person that is an introvert has a lot of issues in growing their careers and lots of different things. But I think in terms of open source, one interesting thing is that, yes, you can contribute to open source by just contributing code, right? I mean, you mentioned the other way around, that you don't have to only contribute code. There's other things you can do, but also you can just do by contributing code, right? So, Otavio is an example where he started to contribute to open source before he was very good in speaking English, for example, right? So he had although he didn't have any of the big problems that you mentioned there, right? But he did have a communication issue, but he could participate in open source even without speaking English. I have a friend that lives in Rio, and he was actually hired. I'm not going to name the name of the company, right? But I mentioned him in my book, and Daniel, his name. And so he got a call, and they said, we want to hire you, right? And then his answer is no. And then the guy in the company said, how this Daniel doesn't want to be hired by us? He writes 70% of our mobile application, right? Call him again. We need to hire this guy. And so they call him, and he said, I don't speak English, so I can't work for an international company on an international team because I don't speak English. And so this particular company actually hired him anyway and sent an English teacher to his house every day so he could learn English, right? And so,
poor guy.
Well, but that's a good example, right? Someone that could participate, that could contribute, that wrote 70% of the code of the application without being able to speak English. So I think that open source allows, and I think the internet in general, right? I mean, there's a lot of cool people that that have disabilities, that have introversion, that have other difficult problems in terms of networking, and maybe they just in a place very far away from everything, right? So, and I think that the internet allows this, and I think when the internet allows this, it allows us to write code in the right way. There's a great message from Simon Phipps, used to be the president of the Open Source Initiative and the chief open source officer at Sun Microsystems. And Simon says that open source is the natural way that we write code on a networked society, right? So the same way that, not going to the bank and just using an app in your phone is a natural way of moving money in a networked society, open source is the natural way that we developers write code when you are networked together. So I think the open source helps a lot of that.
And Yara, you have something to add, but I also wanted to ask, do you, at your conferences, do you think about the people, who sit in the corners?
Yes, this is hard for me because I am that person that goes to a bus trip and I talk with, the neighbor for, the entire trip, or in the airplane, and I want to hear their stories, no matter which area they are. I'm just interested, in their stories, and I really enjoy that. And I need to take care, because then am I being inconvenient with this person on my side? Do they want to talk or not? So for me, it's really easy to talk to people, to approach people, and to start a conversation. And but of course, we need to take a lot of care, because talking too much and listening, right? We need to listen to understand the word, people, and needs and objectives and goals and lots of things. So when we think about these people that doesn't like that much to interact with anyone, I can understand that if Otavio, he's in the airplane, maybe it's not that interesting to hear that, old lady story about, anything she has to talk about. And when we think about conferences or open source, it's like we are creating a segmentation on the world on people that like the same thing as us. So when we go to Java user group, I can speak out and loud, I collaborated on JSF. When we open the spectrum and we think about, other communities, maybe they will laugh, you worked on JSF. And when we go broader, like the conversation in the bus, they would say, what is JSF? Who cares about that, right? So when we go to conferences or to networks like, even Twitter or LinkedIn or GitHub or anything, we are creating this perfect segmentation of people that want to talk about the same subject that we do. And this makes it easier for everyone, that it's not crazy about communication, right? Because at least you have a better control on the topic. So I really, really believe that communication skills are really important for everyone, for selling your ideas, for getting what you need and what you want from your teammates and everyone. So increasing communication skills, even if you like it or not, even if it's a big pleasure to be speaking to other people or not, it's one extremely important part of your career development, right? Maybe you will work better with written communication. Maybe you work better with, in person or online or anything. But it's really important that we can enhance our communication skills in order to, be a good leader or, be a good teammate. So I really believe it's very important to do that. And
I totally agree.
In general, it's much easier for us to talk about things we like and we know. So when, you know, Otavio will be talking about OpenJDK, he's an extrovert, right? He's not an introvert anymore because he knows, he likes, you know, he has interest on that. So I believe that for, you know, people that it's not really interested on, you know, in meeting people and why I need everything, maybe creating these filters and, you know, advancing on the segmentation on people that really has the exactly same goal that we do. So open source projects, conferences, and all of that, it's the perfect place to exercise that and to, you know, find how pleasure it can be to talk more and more with people that has the same interests as us and how we can grow. Because communication is part of showing how we can add value to any problem solving. So as computer
let's take your point
scientists,
about communication and maybe pull in one of the questions that we have from the audience, because I love what you're saying about the importance of communication there. And we have a question from Aris Ripandi, how to manage an open source project, especially the team. So that's a really broad question, but maybe we can focus in on just one aspect of it. So we've established that communication in the project is super important and that it can also be super beneficial for individuals, but we've also kind of identified that different people communicate different ways. Even in the group of people on this call, we each have our different style and we have different comfort levels communicating in different situations. So if you're going to lead an open source project, that's something you want to think about, is how are people meant to communicate with each other, and maybe making sure that people with different communication styles have a way that they can express themselves that, you know, it might work different ways for different people. So I can think of, for example, a project that, you know, the issue queue is one of the main ways to communicate, written communication. But you might also have a vibrant Slack or IRC or Discord or Mumble or something where it's more real time, okay? And it might bring voice or video into that too. And the difference between asynchronous communication or real-time communication can make a real big difference in how well you can work through a problem. So oftentimes issue queues in open source projects become epic novels of disagreement and frenemies, right? Like, you know, people showing their true colors and getting very heated about very small things. Whereas sometimes if you just pop over into Slack or Discourse or any other more real-time thing where you can like see people's responses as they're coming, then it's easier to work things through and react like humans to what people are saying. But that's all still written communication. Sometimes jumping on a call like this, and thank goodness these technologies are so easy with Zoom and Google Meet and Jitsi and FaceTime and whatever you use to communicate face-to-face. So think about how you can incorporate these different communication channels into your open source project and encourage people to use them in ways that you get the most value of it. So if it's like making a breakout to like solve a problem, yeah, go to voice, go to Slack. But if it's something that's going to have an institutional decision-making moment, like, you know, if there's like knowledge that you have to pass on to the people who come along later to understand what's going on, like, why did we change this from red to blue? Oh my goodness, well, there's a big reason. What is the reason? Then maybe that needs to be in the issue queue, or maybe you take what you've decided in Slack and put it back into the issue queue. And then that's like the interactive type of communication. You might also, in your open source project, want to think about a more broadcast publishing type of communication. Think like a newsletter or blog posts where you summarize what's going on and wrap things up for people at a high level. Like, why did we change from red to blue? Well, here, let me tell you the reasons. So they don't have to go through the issue queue. So maybe if we just answer that question through that lens, then communication is one of the ways that you want to think about running your open source project. Anybody want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Yara. Oh, communication is crucial. Let's do it quickly. Because when you talk about huge open source projects, usually there is a huge number of vendors like Java, Apache, Eclipse Foundation. Usually are several companies behind. You need to explain why you'd like to define that roadmap, why do you like to improve that code, and also improve the specification itself. Why should I put that feature? And also, that's usually useless if you write an amazing code and nobody knows about that, right? So can you write an amazing Java feature in the Java 15 and nobody knows, so it's become useless. So you need to use that communication to say that news to everybody. And if you are a little shy, my recommendation is baby steps. So start with a small meetup, Lightning tokens. If you have no idea about English, that you learn English. Okay, if you have no idea about English, you're not supposed to be here. But anyway, try to practice it every day, at least 5 minutes, and that's improved a lot. Trust me. I mean, I come from a city that has no idea about English. I mean, it's from Salvador, so it's a poor city of the third world country. So it's a terrible, and I could improve my English use that, and for sure the networking.
Yara,
Can
go
I
ahead, and
just
then we've got a question
go?
from Juan
Okay, I
Esteban.
just want to go back on the open source management, right? I'm not very experienced on managing open source projects, but I am on managing open innovation projects, right? So how we can manage collaboration. And when I see, user groups or open source or other projects where we want to have collaboration, people are doing that volunteers. And so I really believe that the way to manage open innovation on open source should be open. And sometimes it doesn't mean just to say the doors are open. This is not enough. So you can collaborate if you want. This is not enough. We need to make it open and clear on how people should collaborate. So if you are starting your open source project, it doesn't solve anything, just it's open on any repository. We need to have guidelines, governance, transparency, process to judge or to take decisions. So I think that open source projects, open innovation, user groups on open, on collaboration, we need to take a really good care about our processes. So when I was speaking about JCP and JSRs and all that, it's very clear how I participate, who can participate, what are the terms, or and the paths and everything. So I really believe that the communication here on managing any open collaboration thing needs to be very clear and transparent, and people needs to understand a bit more on how decisions are made and all that. And I tell you, it's much harder to take any action or any decision in open source projects. Many times people say, Yara, why you don't just take the decision? Why you want to make everyone participate or everyone aware? This makes us slowly, right? But if we want people to collaborate and give their time as volunteer for something that we dreamed, we, created, and probably, we need to make people comfortable on the process. They know what they are doing and why they are doing and how they need to do, and they need to feel ownership. If you depending on the decisions, we need to pay the cost of taking a collaborative decision several times, even if it takes longer than just, making everything top down. Top down decisions for everything doesn't work for collaboration, right? We need
well, there's a penalty for not building consensus. The ultimate consequence for any open source project of not building consensus is that somebody will simply take the code and start over, or take it in their own direction, and then you have the famous fork, which
exactly.
can be a great thing, or it can be a horrible thing for the project.
Yeah.
It can kill the project. It could bring new life to the project. It is what it is, but it's usually something that you want to avoid if you want everybody's efforts and momentum to go into your project. Then you want to avoid the fork.
Exactly, and it doesn't need to be, totally democracy on, on votes and everything. Sometimes we need to respect decisions and all that, but just take a special care on how we communicate that, on how, we, every time we can, we let people participate on the decisions, right? So, each detail matters for people that are giving their time as volunteer. So if you are an open source project manager, one of your main goals is to make your volunteers feeling that it's worth, that, the time that they are spending worth for them. So giving space, giving light, recognition, and sense of autonomy, sense of ownership and all that. So if you are managing an open source project, you are managing a team without money. Right. So
usually,
you
yes.
need to think, usually, yes, of course, but you need to think about the individuals, who is working for us, how we are working together, why they are working, listen, how they are. So it's important to think about the human side of that.
Thank you. So
yeah,
Bruno,
I want to make a point on this about money that you guys said usually, right? So what I think about open source and a lot of things, right? So Yara does an amazing job of working with the TDC event, for example, that you have hundreds of communities, right? That each one, Yara is able to put people that usually you see online. I mean, not people, but communities that you see online bashing each other. They work together at the same event, right? And so I think that the thing that we always have to think about, and that goes to Yara's first comment when she said here that, how you can make money, right? How you can survive by doing open source and everything. And I think that there is a vision here on what is a volunteer. A lot of people kind of think, a volunteer is someone that does that without receiving money for it. And actually a volunteer is someone that does that because he wants to do it, right? And so he might be receiving money for doing that, right? But he wants to do it. And I think that's what open source is all about, right? We work, companies and developers, they participate in open source, and they participate for their own reasons, whatever they are, right? They might be, you don't know, they might be making a lot of money behind the scenes, right? For what they're doing, right? They might be consultants, they might be selling their service, they might be authors selling their books, but they're doing it because they want to do it. And I think this is the hardest part when you manage a team where everyone is there because they want to be part of that. And then at the moment they don't want to be part of that anymore, they just leave, right? So you don't have, you can't really tell people, you have to do this, right? Because that's you can't, right? You're not their boss. You don't pay them. You don't, they're working on their own desire.
You have to understand their motivations.
Yeah, so I think that's important to understand, because a lot of companies are trying to do open source. A lot of companies are trying to do community, not only open source, but communities. This works for a lot of things, right? Communities and user groups and all of that. And a lot of companies want to participate on that, but they don't really understand that, you have to create the means that other people want to participate for their own reasons, right? So that's why when you talk about, recognition and all these kind of things, that you're giving more reasons for people to participate, so they want to do it. And I think it's not about the money. It's about it's being a volunteer because you're doing because you want to do it.
So Bruno, thank you. That was a really great point, and I agree with you. We do have a question from Juan Esteban. He's asking if we have any recommendations for someone from Colombia wanting to work in Brazil apart from learning Portuguese. So let's leave the language, part out of it and assume that he'll figure out his Portuguese. And I'm wondering, as I'm thinking about it, and I'm the only one not from Brazil here, so maybe I'm not the one to judge this, but maybe it's a more universal question. Is there a way to find a job in a different country than you live in by participating in their open source communities and making networks?
Well, I think, as I said before, open source is a great way for you to work anywhere you want, really, right? So, be it a company or a country or anything, because today, almost everyone, every company in the planet, right? They use soft in some way. That everyone, right, has some open source. Either they use some open source, right? Some kind of open source project, or they have their own project that's open source, right? So I think a great way, because actually, let me use this. I'm just gonna send here the link on the chat. So if anyone is watching here, if you want to download my book right now, it talks a lot about this. So I'm just going to put the link in the chat right now, and also is going to be on the description, right? But the thing is, if you want to work on great projects, right? The thing that I say a lot of times is that people need to trust you before they need you. So when they need you, they're going to call you and not someone else, right? So if they trust you before they need you, whenever that happens, whenever there's a great opportunity, when there's a great project, they're going to call you, right? So Esteban, if you want to work in Brazil or anywhere else, right, put yourself in a position where people trust you before they need you. So open source is a great way to do this, right? Because when you're working on an open source project, there's hundreds, thousands of companies that are going to be using your open source project. For example, let's say you choose an important open source project. And then people are going to see, hey, Esteban works on open source, right? He works on the project we do. He works on the project on our project, right? Is this the best way? I mean, you can just call in a company and say, look, I write the code that you use, or I write the code that's your code, right? Can I come work for you? I mean, that's actually maybe not exactly these words, right? But that's exactly what you're doing. So I think that open source is a great way for you to do that, because it allows you to show that you're trustworthy, to show your value way before they need you, right? And so I think that's a cool way to do it.
So here's a pro tip for anybody who wants to stealthily infiltrate any company that has an open repository anywhere. Find their open repository that they've got on GitHub, even if it's just their documentation, and start proofreading it. Doesn't matter if you're gonna just look at the code comments and find grammar errors, or something's not clear, or you can explain it just a little bit better, or the formatting's wrong, or maybe you'll even find a bug. Find their open repositories and start making pull requests, start filing patches. There's one guy at my company I hired. The day before his interview, we got 20 patches on our documentation, our public documentation, from this guy. And he showed up for the interview the next day and was like, what do I have to say? Of course we're going to hire you. You don't even need to tell me anything. You just proofread our entire documentation.
There's some people call this a pre-interview project, right? So anytime you're coming to an interview, you should look for opportunities that you can help the company before you even show up for the interview, right? And so that's a great way, because once you come to an interview, like you just said, this guy, right? He's already working for you, right? So so that's really important. And I have a cool story about this. There's a friend of mine that one day we're talking about his future, his career, what is the thing that he wanted to do, and he said, you know what, I want to work for Disney. I said, that's great, man. And I asked him, I said, is this like a childhood dream? Or is that something that you really want to do? I said, no, I think it's something you really want to do. So I said, let's find out. So we went on, we opened up a web browser, we went to Disney's open source projects. And man, when I look at the list of open source projects, I'm like, I want to work for Disney too. Right? It's like such a cool, amazing projects, right? And if anyone is interested in open source project, go check those big companies, right? They have amazing open source project. And so this friend of mine, when he looked at the project and said, man, there's such a great things. And then he said, you know what? I just realized it was a childhood dream. Now that I know it's possible, right? I realize it's a childhood dream because I love what I do. I want to keep working on the company I work at right now. And I want to keep doing what I'm doing. So that by itself was really important, because then he's switching his mind and actually being a great guy at what he's doing right now, instead of keeping this childhood dream. But that's a good example, right? If you wanna work in any company, go to their open source projects. You might be amazed at the things they do, even when you don't consider them as open source contributors. So that's actually a great thing.
So you guys are amazing to talk to. I think we could probably talk with each other for 7 hours straight. Otavio, would you please show everybody in the audience the Kool-Aid that you're drinking? What are you drinking there? Yes, Deploy Friday. And do you know why it's Deploy Friday? It's because you should never be afraid to deploy your application on Friday. Nothing will go wrong when you deploy on Friday if you have tested deploying your application on Platform SH hundreds of times. With every commit, with every pull request, with every change you make, you're practicing your production deployment. And that's why we encourage you to deploy on Friday. Yes. And since we are on the phone with 3 Java people, well, three and a half, I'm like a half a Java person in a previous life, I wanted to put a template in the description of the video so that the audience could go and try something to do with Java on Platform SH. There are lots of templates you can launch on Platform SH that have to do with Java. Otavio's written them all, so if you find any problems with them, talk to him. But we are looking forward to our topic next week, where we talk to Quarkus with Otavio, and that's a Java application framework, application server, and you can launch the Quarkus application server on Platform SH with an example application using the link in the video. The link in the video also, in the description, also has the link to Bruno's book. And yeah, anybody else want to call out, Yara, any conferences that people should be thinking about?
Sure, but just one minute story, but you
Yes,
talk
please.
about Deploy Friday, right? I remember my first job at Accenture, we had 2 deploys, and it was, one of them was, the deploy was done by the team at India. So they work with a different time zone, and our deploy was always 7 p.m. and we had a deploy Thursday. And I had this Eric Clapton show, and we wanted to do, and I had this show, I had the tickets, I would introduce my future husband to my mom and all that. And we had this terrible deploy to do, and we were, having problems for several weeks, working at late night and all that. And we did this deploy at 7, and it didn't work. And it didn't work 8, it didn't work at 9. And, I came to the show like 1 hour late. He was already singing my preferred song and all that. So, you are really brave people to deploy Friday, okay?
So, several things we learned from this. First of all, Accenture should be using Platform SH. Always.
But this was in 2000, okay? This was
okay, but
in
they should still be
2001.
using Platform SH. Come on, back me up on that.
But you are really
so
brave.
Accenture people, I'm talking to you.
No, that was in 2000. It was very.
Second thing, if you screw up a deploy, then you're like having personal consequences. Look, you might not have gotten married if the deploy had gone really badly. 1 more hour and like you would have been like out a husband.
Yes. So you are really, I'm glad that everything changed, and it's so better right now than it was in 2001. So I was very in the beginning of the career, and the thing I was most afraid in life was deploy time. So I like the mug, and the confidence you show people to deploy Friday. So keep doing this great work. it's really nice to.
And thank you all for being guests on the show. I really enjoyed it. I hope the audience did too. And we're going to call it a show. Goodbye, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
All right. Hey, that was great. Really lively. You're all beautiful people. I loved listening to your stories. You've all done great things. Bruno, I just love the way that you're always thinking about the audience and their point of view. And this isn't about us, it's for them. It's for them. I love that. That's really great. And Yara, I just love the way that you are focused on bringing people together to achieve something. That's really beautiful meeting you both.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very
Thanks for
much.
doing this. This is great.
And thanks, Otavio, for introducing me to your friends.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
I think that
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Brazil represent.
You are a very
Yes,
good
Brazil
host.
represent.
You are a very good host. I like the way you speak and you introduce, and you're a very good host. So
Thank you. Well, maybe we
guys,
can meet in
I
person
guess
someday.
we are still aligned.
Yeah. So
Great.
So where are you located?
In Cologne,
Yeah.
Germany.
Oh, you're in Germany. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'm American originally, but I've lived in Germany for the last 21 years.
Okay. So Otavio, we already know
You're
that we
live.
have a tour to do in Europe, right? He just said let's go meet in person. So we have a tour to go to Europe now.
Hell yeah. And you know what else?
You are still alive. Okay.
You know what else? Fuck COVID.
Yes. Oh yeah. Especially in Germany, right? I mean, you're like no one has a problem with COVID in Germany, right?
Well, I hope we don't have a resurgence. I'm just, as a self-professed extrovert, I don't like not being able to go see my friends and not having conferences and all of that. I really miss the personal contact.
Yeah.
we are still alive.
Thankfully, we have a lot to be thankful for.
We are live, I think, on YouTube.
We are live.
What?
We are live on YouTube, man.
Ah, that's awesome. Oh, look, there's a confirmation screen. Hey, everybody, we're still live. I have to press end twice. It just YouTube wants to make sure.
Okay, wait. Don't cut it. Don't cut it. Now that we're still live, let me quickly.
Yeah,
okay,
for it.
we're still live. Let's quick talk to the guys here. So, hey, Juan, that's great. Great for telling us that we're still live. But there's 3 comments here there's a guy that commented a lot of things here, Larry, and we didn't talk about him at all. So let me quickly do this.
Yeah, do it.
So Larry asked, he made a comment here in the very beginning saying that free soft existed since 1984 and open source is a junior rebrand. And then Elder said, open source is different than free software. And I think I kind of agree with both of you. Open source and it's not free software, but it is the same licenses, right? So it's the same software, right? So it's open source and free software is exactly same software. It's 2 approaches from the same idea of working networking, right? Free software focus on the developers, right? So the developers, all of the freedoms on free software are focused on the developers. Open source, it's a more broad thing that kind of brings in the companies and everyone else, right, into the fold. So I think that's 2 different approaches from this exactly same software. I think those, I used to be director of the open source initiative for twice. So, that's a good point, both at Elder and Larry. And then Larry says that open source software, people who started with something else and moved into tech far outnumber people who went straight into tech. At least that's been my experience. And I think there's an interesting, I don't have research on this. There's an interesting thing that, every time that if you are in tech, if you're a developer, you study software development, for example, it's easier for you to get a job as a developer, right? So then once you get a job as a developer, you have the first years of your career pretty much laid out, right? A lot of people that I see, they have doubts at the very beginning how I get my first job, but then they have like 3-5 years that they're not worried about their careers anymore because they have a job. They just keep going, right? And then what I see a lot, Larry, is that people that have not started as developers, right, they end up working as open source as a way to get the first job, for example. So that's one of the reasons. And then what I see a lot is that developers that have more than 5 years, they start feeling bored that they're not growing anymore, and then they start participating in open source. So I think that you have a good point there, Larry. That's important, right? And so just those two comments here that he was mentioning, because I thought that I was.
Thanks, Bruno. Great save to the potentially embarrassing mistake of not actually ending the live stream. Amazing. It's
no problem.
Like if we were politicians, we would have had one of those moments where we were on camera and we didn't even know we were on camera, and we'd start like revealing all our embarrassing secrets or something like that. But we're just open source developers, so well, hey, our lives are not that interesting, right?
All right. Oh, it's open, right?
Exactly.
It's all open anyway, right?
All right. I'm ending the stream for real this time. Bye, everybody. Thanks for sticking around so long. And I'm going to confirm now. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Bye for here.